Welcome to Visa Spotlight, a podcast by Visa that shines a light on the most exciting developments in the payments landscape right now, while also giving you a glimpse into what the future holds for us all.
Hello everyone, I'm your host Dan Baxter, and in today's episode we're going to explore the new security paradigm. We'll be looking at some of the payment threats across the region and the great advances and steps that industry is taking to ensure that we can maintain the robustness of risk and security across the region. I'm joined today by our Regional Risk Officer, Charles Lobo, who's a true expert in the field. Charles oversees security and risk across Visa in more than 90 markets in the Central and Eastern Europe, Middle East and Africa region, and previously worked for a number of large financial institutions. Charles, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for that very generous introduction.
Well, welcome on board. So Charles, perhaps as our first question, you could just start by giving a bit of context and a bit of an overview for the importance of security in this region and the way in which you see this within digital payments.
Sure. I think that's a great way to start, Dan. So with this rapid growth and this giant leap forward in digital commerce that we see, what comes along with it is tremendous convenience, tremendous ability to transact in real time for the customer. But with every click, there's also an opportunity for risk to emerge. And risks are typically in the domain of security. What we look at is as this great leap forward has happened to digital, consumers have had to keep pace. And there are so many more new digital natives or first-time digital natives. So consumers remain the weakest link, and that's one of the elements that we have to remember. What this great leap forward in digital also has done is that merchants or businesses are now having to manage a lot more digital payment data than they had before. And that puts a lot of responsibility on, again, in the domain of security. With this great leap forward in digital, the threat actors or the bad guys, as we call them, they have access now to technologies at an unprecedented way, right? And so their ability to do bad in the digital domain is again unprecedented. It's tremendous. So if you look at all of this, the great leap forward has been fantastic in terms of the growth of digital, the benefit to consumers of being able to transact anywhere, anytime in a very seamless way. But it's also created a lot of opportunities for bad to be done. And that's why security is at the heart of this entire discussion.
It's an extremely interesting area. And as you said, over the last 5 years, we've seen this absolutely huge digital transformation.
Yes.
I mean, the way in which we live our lives has changed fundamentally in the last 5 years. And, that's the case for most consumers and many merchants and many governments and other organizations there as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you said, it does bring threat, and it brings concern and brings a need to be able to sort of focus on risk and security as well.
Yeah.
What are some of the steps when we look at resilience and security that industry has taken over this time to really sort of preserve and maintain that utmost security, which is what consumers expect?
So that's a great question, because the industry, and we have to recognize that the industry has made great strides forward. So the adoption of secure technologies has been really impressive. As you know, Visa keeps innovating and bringing out new technologies. One of them, specifically for e-commerce, is 3D Secure. And we brought out 3D Secure 2.0, which is the enhanced version of 3D Secure, which has 10 times more data elements and is therefore much more powerful. It's impressive that in the last 18 months, there's been a close to 100% adoption of 3D Secure, the new 3D Secure technology across our region. What that speaks to is the intent of both the issuers and the acquirers to invest in these technologies and adopt these technologies. So that's been a very, very positive step forward by the industry. It gives the consumers a much better experience when thinking about how they and experiencing how they transact in the e-commerce and m-commerce domain. Another big step forward has been with the adoption of tokens. Now, as you know, tokens are a tremendously secure technology where the customer data, sensitive data is protected. We've seen in the region a massive growth in the issuance of tokens. So in our region, we have now over 300 million tokens that have been issued. And that speaks to the progress that token issuers have made to adopt this technology and give their customers the ability to secure their credentials. But very importantly, on the flip side of that is the fact that not just issuance of tokens have grown, but the actual adoptions of tokens, that means putting tokens to use, where we've seen very strong growth. And that means that on the acquiring side or the enablement side for transactions to take place, there's been an equal effort. And that's why it's important. Every payment needs both the issuer and the acquirer to step up their efforts. And that's what we've seen happen. And so the industry has made these strides. There's also been progress in the realms of cybersecurity. So a lot more awareness, a lot more sensitivity to the requirements around cybersecurity. And lastly, about protecting consumers. So our stakeholders we see a heightened awareness. We see a heightened sense of responsibility to make consumers more aware around security. So these are some of the elements that we have seen.
I mean, it's interesting. It sounds like there's been great progress both on the technology side, but also in terms of the collaboration and working with industry to address some of those areas, all against this backdrop of a growing number of threats that are out there.
Yeah.
Could you explain and perhaps give us a bit of a flavour for some of the threats which you still see either prominent at the moment or which are emerging, which the industry needs to really ensure that we are able to address?
Sure. So this is a domain that we constantly keep looking at, and we are. It takes up all of our time, so to speak. Some of the trends that we have seen are the fact that consumers or humans remain the weakest link, and I'll explain more as I go along. Another trend that we see is the development and evolution of cyber threats, how they have developed so rapidly. The third trend is around AI. Yeah, and I'm sure AI is everywhere today. It's like a buzzword, but there's a very, very deep implication for our industry and for security as far as AI is concerned. And the fourth trend that we see is just this ecosystem that we operate in and how this ecosystem has become so more complex. So if I touch on the first bit, which is about humans, last year we did our annual Stay Secure campaign, which is really a study. We talked to 6,000 individuals across 17 markets in our region and understood the dynamics of consumer behavior, specifically in the domain of security and fraud. And we found some really amazing results, Dan. Over half the people who we talked to felt that they were savvy and smart enough to detect a fraud when it is happening, right? Over half of the respondents. Surprisingly, in that same cohort, 90% of them would not actually spot a fraud while it was happening to them. And this is the phenomenon that I call costly confidence. Yeah. So you feel that you're well equipped, but when something is actually going wrong, you miss all the signs. And how did we uncover this was the fact that we were trying to understand, do consumers understand the language of fraud? Yeah. And do they see those signs of things happening, of vulnerabilities at the time when a fraud is taking place. And the fact is they missed all the signs. And so the consumers continue to be the weakest link, and that's an area of focus for not just us, but for the industry at large. The second bit is about how cyber attacks and the threat actors have become just so sophisticated in what they do. A few years ago, ransomware came on the scene, whereby your technical infrastructure would be taken control of by the bad guys, and you'd have to pay them a large amount of money in order for them to release your technology stack. Today, what we are dealing with is ransomware as a service. So the fraudsters have actually industrialized their craft. And what that gives is the ability to conduct fraud and cyber attacks at scale. It's an industry out there. Yep. And so we've got to be very, very cognizant of that threat, because we've got to prepare for how that could affect us. And that brings me to my third point, which is about AI and this new technologies. And all of us are benefiting tremendously from AI and generative AI. Visa puts AI to work. We've been in AI for the last 30 years. So we know how to put it to work to do great good. But the bad actors are able to take that very, very powerful technology and put it to work to do a lot of harm. So, for example, there are programs that fraudsters run trying to guess card numbers. And this is the art form called brute force attacks, where they attack a financial institution system trying to guess card numbers by pumping in a large, high volume of transactions. This can only be enabled by putting technology to work and putting technology to do bad things. So we have to be cognizant of the fact that AI is introducing new threats at a very rapid rate. One of the very emerging threats that we've seen is this whole concept of the deep fake, where the AI is put to use in order to impersonate personalities and voices and videos. Whole meetings, digital meetings, have been faked by using AI technology. So that's a huge threat that we have to be aware of. And the last thing is around the ecosystem. So, payments and the payments industry, as we know, is being disrupted continuously. The ecosystem is not a simple ecosystem. This used to be a very simplistic, in a simplistic world, it used to be an issuer, an acquirer, card holder, and a merchant, 4 parties. There were only 4 parties in this model. Now there are N parties. Every day new players are coming into the ecosystem. So the landscape of payments is just massively expanded and grown. And what that does is it gives you an attack surface to attack from different angles and different domains. And that's what creates the complexity for us. So this massively complex ecosystem with so many different players and all the vulnerabilities that could be brought in creates a huge attack surface. So I would say these are the 4 dimensions of the threat landscape, current trends, and I see them developing in the future as well.
Really interesting. And so those 4 areas were around consumers,
Yes.
consumer education and awareness, around almost the professionalization of some of the bad actors, the use of emerging technologies, and then ensuring the resilience and reliability of the wider ecosystem in our role as custodians of the ecosystem. It's an incredibly interesting area. So just over a month ago, we gathered many of the greatest minds in risk and security from across the CEMEA region into here in Dubai for the annual Security Summit, which Visa's been hosting for several years now across Central Europe, Middle East, and Africa. there was a great 2 days of conversations. A lot of the themes that you've just covered were discussed. But the overall event was framed around this concept of steering the new security paradigm. Could you give me a bit of a flavor of sort of how you see that paradigm moving forward?
Sure. Thanks, Dan. I mean, the event was a fantastic event. We had over 300 of our clients and partners come and attend this event. Every year it gets bigger. But the realization that we have is the fact that every year the pace at which our industry is moving forward and the pace at which bad guys are moving forward is just so rapid that we continuously have more and more topics to talk about. And so this year we talked about the new security, steering the new security paradigm. And I'd like to think of this new security paradigm as a framework. Yeah? A framework that encompasses three things. One is it's about enabling the industry to build flexibility into how we respond to the emergence of technologies, the threats that are knocking at our door, the opportunities for creating better consumer experiences for us. So that's the first part of the framework. The second part of the framework is recognizing this complex interplay between human and technology. Yeah? This is very important. Our lives, like I mentioned, have never been so digital. Yeah. We are having to learn technologies at a very rapid rate. There are digital natives who are first-time digital natives. They don't really understand how this technology works. So there's this complex interplay between human and digital and all the elements of that. So that's the second part of this framework. And the third part of this framework is essentially saying, how can we harness these fabulous technologies that we have to do greater good, to create more secure experiences, to create more seamless experiences, because that's what consumers are looking for. So that's the new security paradigm.
That's great. Well, it's clearly a fascinating area there. Perhaps we could spend a bit more time unpicking this new security paradigm. Could you give me a couple of examples of the types of innovation that Visa's introducing and deploying to help stay ahead of the threats and foster the kind of collaboration that you spoke about earlier?
Sure, Dan. Let me make it real for you. Yeah? So it's not just a conceptual framework. This is where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. I have many examples. I'll pick a few which are recent and relevant. So we've observed a fraud trend in which fraudsters are misusing one of the transaction types that we have, which is called a purchase return authorization. Right? When you return something at a store and the store, they swipe your card, you get a notification that you've returned the item. Now that's based on an authorization message that flows through the systems. What we realized and we found through our engagement with clients is that a lot of clients did not have the necessary processing power and capability to handle that kind of a authorization message. So what has Visa done? Visa has actually invested. So we've used some of our existing technology and built it out. So there's a technology called stand-in processing, or STIP, that we refer to. We rolled out something called STIP Lite for our region, in which that Visa takes on the operation of processing that return authorization and processes it correctly and provides an advisement to the consumer. What that does is it closes the vulnerability, because we've got a standard set of rules that allow us to process the transaction correctly. So that's one example. The other way is actually working with the client. So our Visa Payment Threat Labs is our ability to test the client's processing environment in a safe and secure. It's almost like a lab test. But it's about testing the capabilities of the client's technology stack to process and respond to authorization requests or processing. So with both these technologies, what we're doing is we're working closely with the clients On one side, if the client doesn't have the capability, we are providing that capability on behalf. And on the other hand, if the client has capabilities and wants to know whether those capabilities are correctly tuned, we can provide that service and enable them to check their systems. So that's one example. The other example is around tokenization. Now, all of us love our device, our mobile phone, and we love to use it to make payments, whether it is with Apple Pay or Google Pay or the such like. That's an area where for you to, in order to use your phone to make a payment, your card credentials need to be personalized on the phone. And that personalization is what we in the industry term as provisioning. Now, the fraudsters have figured out a way of how to social engineer or for better words, dupe customers into getting their credentials and personalizing a customer's credentials on a fraudster's mobile phone. And that became a vulnerability that we found in the ecosystem. So we put our AI investments to work. We've invested close to $10 billion in the last 5 years in AI. We put our expertise to work there. And we created models whereby we are now able to provide our issuers with a score. For every time someone is trying to provision or personalize credentials onto a phone, a score is generated which gives the issuer an indication of whether what the likelihood of that provisioning being a fraudster making an attempt, so to speak. So what's that doing? It's empowering our clients to give a better customer experience to their customers, to secure that domain. Right? So that's putting AI to work. A third example is, and this is very relevant, is about our partnership with the public sector. Yeah, a private-public partnership to do good. Very recently, earlier this year, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the Dubai Police for the setup of an operations center for economic crimes. What does that do? That center do? It's about bringing together the forces of the law enforcement, financial institutions, and organizations like Visa, where you could share threat intelligence in a more rapid and cohesive way. And what that does is it fosters collaboration at a much faster rate. And so we've been absolutely thrilled to have this partnership with the Dubai Police. We've played a very strong role in enabling the build out and the structuring of this facility. And we're thrilled to see how it works and how it develops and how it contributes to making society safer.
Great. Well, there's clearly lots of work underway and still lots of opportunity ahead. We're going to move for the next couple of questions to a bit of a rapid fire round,
okay,
if that works for you.
Sure.
You ready?
Yep.
Good. So the first question, as Regional Risk Officer, what are your top 3 priorities for the 12 months ahead?
I don't know about the 12 months ahead, but they're certainly top priorities, Dan. The first one is about the team. Yeah. I'm incredibly proud to lead a team of absolute professionals who are dedicated to their craft day in and day out. And what's most important is that we always keep our stakeholders top of mind, whether it's our clients or our internal stakeholders or our partners in the wider ecosystem. Just being laser focused is a huge priority, and making sure that our team is always at the top of their game, and enabling them and making sure that they've got everything at their disposal that they need to perform. So that's the first big priority. The second one, and this is not a rank order, it's just the top 3 that I have, is just making sure that we never lose sight of the tremendous value of our network and our brand. Right? So Visa stands at its heart stands for trust. Research has shown that when a customer sees a Visa sign on a door, the likelihood of them wanting to transact with that merchant just goes up by 5 times. And so that's something that we have to protect, and it's a passion for all of us, and making sure that we never lose sight of that. So protecting this valuable network of ours is just a very, very, very high priority right on top there. And the last one is about recognizing our realities and just making sure that we are always in tune with the fact that this amazing ecosystem that we are a part of is getting more and more complex, it's richer, it's providing huge opportunities for payments to evolve and disrupt and get embedded in everything that we do and how we live, and also consequently a lot of opportunities for bad to happen. So just being cognizant of and recognizing and understanding our ecosystem and the environment in which we are, these are my top 3 priorities.
Good. Well, those are your 3 priorities. You've spoken a lot today around the importance of partnership and collaboration.
Yeah.
What would be your 3 sort of call to action for overall industry in the security and risk space?
Yeah, so the first one has to be about trust. So just making sure that we understand why our consumers and our constituents trust us, and what do we need to do to maintain and build that trust. That's absolutely essential. The second would be about never losing sight of our consumers and making sure that we understand every element of how our consumers work and how they want to lead their lives, and making sure that we are always working for our consumers. That's the second bit of advice. And the third one would be how do you put technology to use? How do you deploy technology? How do you understand how technology is shifting and moving, and what you need to do in order to keep pace with that? And I think that's one of the roles that Visa plays, right? We are, immersed in understanding these new technologies and putting them to work. So if there's help that is needed, we are always there to help. And so I would advise these 3 things as being the most important for industry.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Charles. It's absolutely fascinating area at an incredibly exciting time for the wider digital payments industry. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Dan. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Good. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the discussion and found it as interesting and as insightful today as I did. See you next time.